The sky above the colony world was cloudy and gray. A storm was coming, but inside their small metal home, it was already dark and cold. Valari, a quiet alien woman with green-tinted skin and glowing eyes, stirred a pot of soup made from root, vegetables and dried leaves. She was trying to make it stretch another day. Her son, Kyle, sat nearby, drawing pictures with a broken stylus on a metal plate. He was only 6 years old, small for his age, but full of questions. And today, he had one that would change everything. "Mom," he said softly. Something appeared on my back. Valari turned, the spoon frozen in her hand. She smiled gently at first, thinking he meant a scratch or maybe a bug bite. "Let me see, little one," she said, kneeling beside him. Kale lifted his worn shirt and turned around. What she saw made her blood run cold. There were faint glowing lines like softly pulsing veins running across his back. They weren't wounds, they weren't bruises. They were symbols. Ancient, ones from a time she had spent years trying to forget. Her knees gave out and she dropped to the floor. "No," she whispered. "Not now. Not him." Kyle looked over his shoulder, confused. "Is it bad, Mom?" he asked, his voice small. Valari's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the marks. They pulsed brighter when her fingers brushed against them. A memory hit her like a hammer. Her younger brother screaming, soldiers dragging him away when the same symbols appeared on his back years ago. They called it the Star Curse, but it was never a curse. It was a signal, a code hidden in bloodlines the galaxy had tried to erase, and now it had returned in her son. She pulled Kyle into her arms and held him tight. Tears ran down her cheeks as she rocked him gently. Kyle didn't understand, but he didn't resist. He just whispered, "Don't cry, Mom. It doesn't even hurt." Valari knew it wasn't about pain. It was about what came next. The signal from those symbols would be detected soon. They always were. Mercenaries, bounty hunters, or worse. Those who believed in the prophecy. They would come to take Kyle just like they took her brother. She couldn't let that happen. That night, while Kyle slept, Valari packed quickly. She filled a sack with dry food, a blanket, a medkit, and one small photo of Kyle's father. He had vanished years ago. He was a scientist, hunted too. She had always feared the day Kale would take after him. Now that day had come. Just before dawn, Kale woke to the sound of Valari strapping on her boots. He rubbed his eyes and asked, "Are we going somewhere?" She forced a smile. "Yes, baby," she said. "We're going to a safer place." He didn't ask questions. He trusted her, like always. That broke her heart even more. They stepped out into the cold wind, the sun barely peeking over the trees. The colony was still asleep, but Valari could feel the danger rising like heat from the ground. She had one goal: get as far from the communication towers as possible before Kale's signal got picked up. She knew the system well, she used to. Work for the Empire before she ran. She knew how they hunted. Kyle walked beside her quietly, his small hand in hers. As they entered the thick forest, the world behind them disappeared. The trees grew taller, the ground softer, and the wind sharper. Kyle kept looking around with wide eyes, sometimes stopping to look at birds or strange glowing plants. Valari wanted to smile at his innocence, but she couldn't. Not today. Suddenly, Kale gasped, holding his back. "Mom, it's glowing again," he said, his voice shaking. Valari turned and saw the marks, brighter now, like stars under his skin. "No, not yet," she muttered. She grabbed Kale and pulled him toward a nearby cave hidden behind tree roots. They crawled inside, the space damp and small but safe for the moment. She wrapped him in a blanket and held him close. Outside, the birds had gone silent. She didn't need to hear engines to know. They were already coming. Maybe not this hour, but soon. Very soon. They would pick up the signal and track him. She looked at her son, asleep in her lap, glowing softly, like a light in the dark. Valari whispered to the stars, "Please, don't take him from me. Not like you took the others." Suddenly, a light appeared at the cave entrance. She froze, pulling Kale behind her. her hand on the small blade she carried. A shadow stood there, tall and quiet, holding a lantern. Then a voice, human, deep and calm, said, "You don't have to hide. I'm not here to hurt you." Valari didn't believe it, not yet. She tightened her grip and prepared to fight, because she would do anything to protect her son, even if it meant facing a human stranger in the dark. Valari held her breath as the human's light flickered against the wet walls of the cave. She didn't move, her hand still clutching the blade. Hidden under her cloak, Kale, half awake, stirred behind her and whispered, "Who is that, Mom?" She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the shadow at the entrance. The human stepped closer, raising both hands slowly, showing he wasn't armed. His voice was steady, low, and strangely kind. "I heard movement," he said. "Didn't expect anyone hiding in the old storm caves." His clothes were rough, like those of a mechanic or a miner. Not a soldier, not a bounty hunter. Still, Valari didn't relax. "What do you want?" she asked sharply, her voice firm. "Nothing," he replied, kneeling just outside the cave. "Just making sure you're not hurt." Then he paused and added, "You're not from the colony, are you?" Valari didn't reply. She had no idea if he was telling the truth or just stalling until others arrived. She'd seen tricks like this before, back when she was young, when soldiers used to lure out survivors. Kale peeked from behind her, his wide, glowing eyes meeting the man's. "Calm gaze, you're bleeding," the man said, pointing to Valari's leg. She looked down, startled. A gash ran down her shin. She must have scraped it when they rushed into the cave. She hadn't even noticed the pain until now. The human reached into a side pouch, pulling out a med patch. He slid it across the ground, careful not to make any sudden movements. "You can take it," he said. "Or not. But I figured you wouldn't have supplies out here." Valari hesitated, then grabbed the patch and slapped it over the wound. The cold gel stung, but the bleeding stopped instantly. She gave a small nod. Not thanks, but acknowledgement. "My name's Grant," he said, still kneeling. "I live a few clicks from here, off the grid." Valari narrowed her eyes. No one off the grid was ever innocent. Not in this galaxy. Still, she sensed no weapons, no tracking devices, just a tired man in grease-stained clothes and a soft voice. "I'm Valari," she said carefully. "And this is my son." She didn't say Kyle's name, not yet. He was still glowing faintly, the strange symbols on his back visible even through his shirt. Grant's eyes shifted, catching the glow. He frowned, curious but not alarmed. "I've seen something like that," he muttered, mostly to himself. Valari's heart jumped. "Where?" she asked quickly, stepping forward just a bit. He looked up at her, serious now. "Years ago on a black site during a contract mission," he said. "Deep science lab, abandoned now." He paused, then added, "They said those marks were a myth, a warning, or a key." Valari's pulse raced. She didn't expect a human, especially a local one, to know about the ancient markings. Not even many aliens remembered them clearly anymore, but he spoke with the tone of someone who had seen too much. "Can help," Grant said, "but not here." He stood slowly and pointed behind him. "I've got a place hidden, safe." He looked at Kale and said softly, "If that glow gets stronger, they'll detect it soon. And when they do, it won't be me knocking next time." Valari wanted to scream. She didn't trust him, she didn't trust anyone. But Kyle was getting warmer, sweating, and the marks were pulsing faster. Time was running out. Grant turned and began walking away. He didn't look back. "Your choice," he said, "but make it fast." Valari hesitated only a moment, then lifted Kale into her arms. He was too tired to walk now, his body weak and his breathing shallow. She followed the human into the trees, heart pounding with every step. They reached a hidden entrance near a cliffside, barely visible from the outside. Grant touched a panel, and a door hissed open, revealing a narrow tunnel lit by soft blue lights. It wasn't a house. It was a bunker, a real one, built long ago, reinforced with steel and insulated from scans. "Inside," Grant said, helping guide Valari through. Kale groaned softly in her arms, feverish. Grant motioned toward a cot and gently placed a scanner on the boy's back. Valari kept her hand on her blade, watching every move. The scanner beeped and glowed. Grant stared at the readings in silence for a long moment. Then he looked at Valari and said, "These symbols, they're not random. They're coordinated, aligned with celestial coordinates." She blinked. "You mean a star map?" He nodded slowly. "And something else," he whispered. "Something locked, something waiting to be awakened." Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and a high-pitched tone buzzed from the bunker walls. "Someone's pinging the outer grid," Grant said quickly, turning off all systems. "They found his signal." Valari stepped back, pulling Kale closer. "Then we run again," she said, her voice shaking. Grant didn't move. "No," he said. "This time, we fight." And for the first time, Valari saw something in the human's eyes. Not fear, but purpose. Valari sat on the edge of the small metal cot, holding Kale close. His forehead was hot, his breathing uneven. The glowing marks on his back were brighter now, like blue fire beneath the skin. Grant moved around the bunker with focus, switching off energy panels shielding the walls. Each light blinked out until only the soft green glow of emergency strips lit the room. Valari watched him closely. She still didn't trust him fully. But Kyle was alive, barely. And Grant hadn't tried to take him. "Yet I've hidden people before," Grant said, pulling a storage unit open. "But none like this." He laid several old devices on a table, tools from another age, ancient scanners, cracked data pads, strange glass tubes with soft humming. Energy inside them, Valari recognized some. Others were alien even to her. "You said, you've seen those symbols before?" she said carefully, cradling Kale's head. Grant nodded slowly, his eyes distant. 15 years ago, he whispered. "I was hired to retrieve tech from an old moon lab. Thought it was just another salvage job." His voice darkened. "But inside we found walls covered in those same symbols, glowing even though the lab was dead." He picked up a damaged tablet and tossed it onto the table. "I saved this before the fires took the rest." He tapped the screen. It flickered, then showed a faint map of the galaxy with strange swirling patterns overlaying it. The same pattern burned into Kale's back. "It's a star map," Grant continued. "But not just directions, it's a message." Valari stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She had heard legends, old stories spoken in whispers. Of children born with maps written into their blood, children used as weapons or locked away as keys. She had always believed they were just myths. Until now. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why my son?" Grant looked at her serious. "Because someone encoded him before he was even born." Valari's eyes widened. "Kale's father," she said under her breath. "He was a scientist, a rebel, a dreamer who once said, 'Our son will carry the future.'" She thought it was just poetry. Now she realized it had been a warning. Grant turned toward a wall and touched a hidden panel. A portion of the bunker shifted, revealing a second room, a lab, long abandoned, filled with more tech. He walked in, motioning Valari to follow. "I never meant to become part of any of this," he said, "but I couldn't walk away once I saw what those marks meant." He pulled out a handheld device, small and worn. "This is a pulse blocker. It'll slow the signal from Kale's body for a while." He attached it gently to the boy's back, covering the marks with a faint shimmer of light. Kale whimpered softly, but then his breathing steadied. The glowing stopped. Valari almost cried in relief. "He'll be stable now," Grant said. "But they're coming, and soon." Valari stood, her eyes sharp. "Then we fight before they find us." Grant hesitated, then nodded. "I've got a few surprises hidden down here," he said, lifting a floor hatch and revealing crates marked with old military codes. He opened one, revealing a pulse rifle, some EMP grenades, and defensive plates. "I used to be more than a mechanic," he added with a bitter smile. Valari stepped closer. "Why are you helping us?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me. You don't owe us anything." Grant paused, then looked at her and said, "Because a long time ago, I failed someone with those same symbols on their back. His voice broke slightly. She didn't survive, and I've been trying to make up for that ever since. Valari didn't ask more, she just said, "Then let's not fail this time." Suddenly, a red light blinked on the wall, a silent alarm. Grant ran to the console and read the readings. A ship just entered the valley. No colony codes, no registry. Valari's blood ran cold. They found us. Grant loaded the rifle and handed her a small blade enhanced with plasma edges. "We hold them at the door," he said, "no matter what." Outside, the night was quiet. But not for long. They could hear it now, the soft hum of an approaching scout vessel. Kale lay still, hidden behind reinforced shielding in the lab, protected for the moment. Valari crouched beside the entry tunnel, her heart hammering in her chest. She had run all her life, but this time she wouldn't run. Not again. The bunker's outer door shook with impact. A second thud followed, louder. Then a high-pitched drill began cutting through. Valari tightened her grip on the blade. Grant stood tall beside her, rifle aimed, his face calm but fierce. "When that door opens," he whispered, "we don't hesitate." Valari nodded, her glowing eyes focused. "For Kyle," she whispered back. Then the door exploded inward, and the fight for Kyle's future began. The bunker door flew off its hinges with a deafening crash. Smoke filled the tunnel. Thick and choking, red sparks danced in the air as metal fragments rained down like tiny falling stars. Valari didn't flinch. She was already moving, blade drawn, instincts from her younger days flaring back to life. Grant opened fire, sending controlled bursts of plasma toward the figures entering the smoke. The first attacker wore a black exosuit, armor plated and face hidden under a mirrored helmet. No words, no warning, only weapons. Valari slashed forward, her blade slicing across the thigh joint of the nearest intruder. The armor cracked, and the figure dropped with a metallic scream. Behind him, two more moved in formation, aiming at the lab entrance deeper inside the bunker. "They're going for Kale," Grant shouted, switching position. "They know exactly what they came for." Valari's blood ran cold. They weren't just here to hunt, they were here to capture, or worse, extract something from Kale's body. Something alive, something valuable, something dangerous. She spun, lunging at another attacker, using the narrow space of the corridor to her advantage. The plasma blade hummed and hissed as it met armor. Grant ducked behind a support pillar, reloading fast. More shadows spilled into the hallway. 4, maybe 5 more enemies, all in formation. Too many, too fast. Suddenly, a loud, sharp pulse echoed through the bunker. Everyone froze. Even the enemy faltered for half a second, weapons jerking. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from the lab. From Kyle. Valari turned her head sharply. A soft blue light poured from the room behind them. A wind, not from air but from pressure. Blew outward, warping the energy around them. The pulse came again, louder, longer, like the ringing of a giant bell underwater, then the lights in. The bunker exploded, all of them, one after another in a ripple of sparks. Weapons shorted, visors flickered, and even Grant's rifle powered down. Only Kale's light remained. Valari dropped her blade, stunned. The symbols on Kale's back were no longer just glowing. They were burning with controlled force, spreading across his skin like lines of language, living, moving code. He floated a few inches above the medical cot, eyes closed, body still. The enemy stood frozen, unsure whether to flee or strike, and that's when Kale opened his mouth. Not to speak, but to sing. A soft tone escaped his lips. Not words, not melody, just sound, ancient and low, vibrating the walls. It resonated with something deeper, like it was calling to the bones of the galaxy itself. Grant dropped to one knee. Clutching his ears, Valari stared in awe and fear. This wasn't a curse. This wasn't a sickness. It was an activation. Kale had awakened. One of the enemy soldiers panicked and raised a weapon. But before he could fire, his body lifted off the ground and slammed into the wall. No hand touched him. No machine moved him. It was Kale, still glowing, still singing. The other invaders turned and fled, dragging the wounded with them. Outside, their ship powered up in haste, rattling the trees as it broke the sky in retreat. Within seconds, silence returned to the valley. Valari slowly stepped into the lab. Kale floated down gently, landing on the cot with a soft thud. His glow faded, the lines receding into his skin. His eyes fluttered open, confused but calm. "Mom?" he whispered. "I had a dream. I was flying." Valari rushed forward and wrapped him in her arms, tears falling freely. "You saved us," she whispered. "You saved us all." Grant stumbled into the room behind her, breathing heavily. His shirt was scorched, his hair a mess, but his eyes were full of wonder. "I've never seen anything like that," he said, staring at Kale. He didn't just push them back. He shut down everything within a mile. Valari looked up. "We have to leave before others come." Grant nodded, but his face was grave. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly, pulling out the damaged tablet again. It updated. When Kale pulsed, he showed her the screen. Now there was a new location on the map, blinking slowly, far beyond the current system. An old sector, abandoned after the Empire's fall. Beside the blinking marker were 4 words in ancient code. "Return to the archive." Valari stared at the screen, heart racing. She remembered the tales, a hidden vault of knowledge, lost long ago, sealed behind ancient code that could only be unlocked by one of the starborn Kale. "Do you know what this means?" Grant asked. Valari nodded slowly. "It means we're not just running anymore," she said, her voice firm. "We're going home." The ship shook gently as it passed through the edge of known space. Outside the windows, stars stretched and swirled in silence. Valari sat in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around Kale. He had fallen asleep after the 3rd jump, his breathing slow and peaceful, but his back still shimmered faintly through his shirt. The marks never fully vanished now, not since the bunker. Grant piloted the old freighter carefully, eyes locked on the blinking coordinates on the nav screen. The location hadn't changed. It was calling them like a lighthouse in the dark. A system long forgotten, marked on maps only by ancient names. Lunthera 9, once a thriving archive world, then erased after the purge. "Almost there," Grant said softly. "One more jump." Valari nodded without speaking. Her mind was racing. She remembered hearing about Lunthera from her father when she was a child, a planet where knowledge was stored in living crystals, guarded by silent machines, where children like Kale, starborn, were once trained, not hunted, until the Empire changed everything. When the last jump ended, the stars shifted and Lunthera appeared. It was quiet and gray, surrounded by rings of broken satellites. The planet looked abandoned, lifeless. But as the ship drew closer, Kale stirred and whispered, "It's waiting." Valari looked at Grant, who raised an eyebrow. "He dreaming again?" "No," she said softly. "He's remembering." They landed on a rocky outcrop near what looked like ruins of an ancient tower. Massive stone pillars jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Cracks ran along the ground, but in the center stood one black arch, untouched by time. It hummed as they approached, responding to Kale's presence. He walked ahead of them slowly, barefoot, eyes wide. The arch lit up in glowing patterns that matched the symbols on his back. Valari reached out, holding Kale's shoulder. "Are you sure?" Kale nodded. "I feel it. Like it knows me." As soon as he stepped through the arch, the earth shifted. A deep rumble echoed across the valley, and the stone floor beneath their feet peeled open like petals, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Grant whistled low. "Well, that's not creepy at all." But he followed without hesitation. Valari held Kale's hand and stepped into the shadows. The underground corridor was lined with lightless walls, but as Kale walked, each section lit up behind him. Pale blue crystals embedded in the walls glowed softly. The deeper they went, the warmer it became. Not from heat, but from energy, like the place was alive. At the bottom, they reached a wide chamber with a single platform at its center. Above it, a floating crystal, massive, clear, and pulsing like a heartbeat. Kale stepped forward, pulled by invisible force. When he touched the platform, the entire chamber awakened. Holograms burst into view. Spinning maps, alien writing, ancient. For thousands of years of data, a voice filled the air, not male, not female, but something in between. Star code accepted. Archive unlocked. Valari fell to her knees, eyes wide. This was it. The place her husband once dreamed of. A place of peace, of knowledge. Hidden away when the galaxy turned to war. A sanctuary for the gifted lost to time. The voice spoke. Again. One starborn remains. Final protocol initiated. Kale looked confused. What does that mean? Grant frowned, reading the glowing projections. There were supposed to be more like you, he said slowly. But you're the last. And now the archive's unlocking its final message. A beam of light from the crystal touched Kyle's chest. He didn't move, just closed his eyes. Images flashed around the room. Planets burning, wars spreading, children marked like Kyle. Taken and tested, then a final image, a fleet, black ships, forming near a red star. The crystal spoke once more. The Black Armada rises. But the child has the key. Valari's breath caught. She looked at Grant. What Armada? Grant stared in disbelief. It's a doomsday fleet, he whispered. Built in secret by the Empire before its fall, designed to wipe out rebel systems. The hologram zoomed in, showing a chain reaction. If the Armada reactivates, it could destroy half the galaxy. Kale held his head, the glow on his back pulsing harder. I can stop it, he whispered. I don't know how, but I feel it. Valari knelt beside him, holding his face. You're just a child, she whispered. You don't have to carry this. But Kale shook his head. I was just a child, Mom. But now I am the key. Grant looked around the chamber, reading ancient scripts. There's a signal we can send from here, he said. A cancellation code. But only Kale's biosignature can authorize it. Valari's heart broke. Her son had just started to live, and now the galaxy was demanding everything from him. Again. But Kale didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placed his hands on the pedestal. The crystal flared. Light filled the room, and far above, in the dead black of space, something ancient began to stir. A choice had been made. A signal had been sent. And Kyle's voice, small but strong, echoed across the stars. Let there be peace. Deep in the archive chamber, silence followed the beam of light that rose from the platform. The signal had been sent. Kyle stood still, his small hands still touching the crystal's surface. His body glowed softly, steady now, calm. But something in the air had changed, above them, across space. Far beyond what the naked eye could see, the Black Armada began to stir. Dozens of ancient warships, asleep for decades, started to blink awake. Lights flickered on, engines hummed, weapon systems scanned empty stars. But then, just as suddenly, the awakening stopped, all systems paused, one final signal entered their core commands, and all at once, the warships powered down again. The code had reached them. Kale's body had carried the final override, the one no general, no admiral, no scientist could fake. Only the true Starborn could stop what the Empire had hidden. And now, that part of history was over. Valari rushed forward as Kale slumped to his knees. She caught him in her arms, whispering his name over and over. I'm here, he whispered, his voice faint but steady. I just feel tired. Grant stood behind them, blinking in awe as the chamber lights dimmed back to normal. You did it, kid, he said softly. You saved billions. Kale looked up at him with a weak smile. I didn't want anyone to get hurt, he said. I just wanted to go home. Valari kissed the top of his head, her tears falling into his hair. You are home now, she whispered. You're safe. But the archive wasn't finished yet. A low hum filled the air. The walls shifted, revealing a hidden room. Inside were rows of capsules, old, dusty, but still powered. Grant stepped in, staring at the strange machines. "These are stasis pods," he muttered. "They've been asleep a long time." Valari followed him, her heart beating faster. Inside the first pod was a child, an alien girl, her face peaceful, small hands curled near her chest. Then the next, another child, different species, but also marked with faint glowing symbols. Valari gasped. "They're starborn," she whispered. "All of them." The archive voice returned. "Preserved during the purge, awaiting the signal of awakening." Grant looked around. "You mean Kale didn't just stop a war?" he said slowly. "He woke the others." Valari turned to her son, who was still kneeling, still glowing softly. His back pulsed once more, and with each pulse, the pods began to open. One by one, the children inside blinked their eyes open, confused but alive. Some looked scared. Others simply stared at Kale, as if recognizing something ancient and familiar. Kale stood slowly, swaying on his feet. "They're like me," he whispered. "I can feel them." Valari moved to his side, steadying him. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," she said. "They're your family now." Hours passed in quiet wonder. The children were fed, clothed, and brought into the main chamber. The archive adjusted to their presence, glowing brighter, warmer. It began to show them images of their past, their worlds, their people, and also their future. Grant repaired one of the old control panels, connecting it to a comm buoy high in orbit. It was time to send a message to the galaxy, not of war, not of power, but of survival. Valari stood beside him as he activated the signal. A recording light blinked and she began to speak. "This is Valari," she said gently. "We are alive. After so many years of fear, so many lost children, we have found a place that remembers. The Starborn are not weapons, they are not cursed, and they are hope." She turned and looked at Kale, now surrounded by the other children. They were laughing softly, helping each other stand, holding hands like siblings from across the stars. "We do not want your crowns," Valari continued. "We do not want revenge. We only want peace, and for the galaxy to never forget who we are again." The message traveled through space, passed through satellites, beacons, even old networks buried in the far reaches of dead systems. It reached ears that once obeyed the Empire. It reached rebels, scientists, and wanderers. And slowly, the lies began to fall away. Kale stood near the edge of a cliff overlooking Lunthera's horizon. The sun was rising now, painting the stone towers in golden light. He looked older, not in years, but in presence. Valari joined him and took his hand. "What now?" he asked softly. Valari smiled gently. "Now we rebuild." Grant approached with a smirk, holding a toolkit in one hand. "And maybe install a few defense grids while we're at it," he joked. Kale laughed for the first time in days, a sound that echoed across the hills like music. The archive lit up one last time, displaying one single message written in both ancient and human language. "The children of the stars have returned." And somewhere, far across the galaxy, others began to rise too. Because peace, like light, spreads best when carried by those who never stop glowing. Lunthera bloomed with life again. Once silent towers now hummed with soft energy. The archive, long buried under dust and grief, had awakened. And with it, the children who were never meant to survive. Kale walked through the stone pathways with steady steps. He no longer wore the worn clothes of a refugee child. Now he wore a simple white robe made of soft fibers drawn from the archive's stores. His back still glowed faintly, but it no longer pulsed in fear or pain. It glowed with purpose. The other children followed him, not because he told them to, but because they felt what he felt. The connection between them wasn't just in blood. It was in light, in memory, in something older than the galaxy itself. Valari watched from a distance, standing beside Grant as they worked on repairing an old satellite dish. She had grown quiet lately, not out of sorrow, but wonder. Her child was no longer a secret she had to hide. He was a voice heard across the stars, and others were beginning to answer. A message had arrived the night before, the first one since Valari's broadcast. A human diplomat from a nearby neutral system. They asked to visit, unarmed, open hands. They claimed to want peace, understanding. They claimed to want to listen. Valari didn't trust it fully, but she agreed to meet them at the outer cliffs. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She wasn't a rebel either. She was something new now, a mother of a star-born child who had changed fate. When the human ship landed, it came alone. No fleet behind it, no soldiers stepping out. Only one woman, gray-haired, kind-eyed, wearing no armor. She walked slowly across the stone bridge and bowed her head when she saw Kale. "I'm Ambassador Rylan," she said gently, "and I've come to speak with the boy who silenced the Armada." Kale stepped forward, his eyes calm but bright. "I'm not special," he said. "I just didn't want anyone to get hurt." The woman smiled warmly. "Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do," she said, "is choose not to fight." They walked together through the archive grounds. Rylan saw the other children, some playing, some learning from old machines. She saw how they worked together like a family. No war, no fear, just light and connection. "These children," she said, "they should have been protected long ago." Valari nodded. "But instead," she said softly, "they were hunted, sold, erased." Rylan turned to her. "And now?" Valari looked at the sun rising across the horizon and said, "Now they shine." Rylan returned to her people with more than words. She returned with a message that peace was still possible, that the forgotten were not gone. They had simply been waiting. Soon, other ships followed, not to conquer, not to control, but to witness. Scholars came bringing books, healers came bringing supplies, builders came offering tools to restore what had been lost. But the archive accepted only those who came without greed, those who wanted to learn, not take. One morning, Kale stood in the highest tower looking at the stars above. He saw a blinking light across the sky, a signal from a far-off world, a response. Another child still out there, marked like him, had sent a message back. "Are you safe?" The child had written. Kale smiled and replied, "Yes, and I'm waiting for you." Valari stood at the doorway watching him type. He looked back at her and grinned. "You said once I might be the last," he said, "but I think I'm just the first." She walked to him and touched his cheek. "You're the first to wake them up," she said, "but you'll never be alone again." Grant built a new home beside the archive, not a bunker this time, but a proper home with windows, gardens, and laughter. He became the unofficial caretaker, protector, and fixer of broken things. The children loved him. They called him Old Iron Hands, even though he wasn't that old. He never asked for thanks. He just wanted to be useful. And maybe, in his quiet way, he had finally forgiven himself for the girl he couldn't save years ago. Years passed, but Lunthera did not fade again. It became a sanctuary, a symbol. People called it the home of the Lightborn, a place where hope lived and grew, not behind walls, but in the open. Under stars that remembered, Valari kept a journal, writing down everything Kale did, not because she wanted fame, but because she never wanted anyone to forget how peace began, not with armies, not with leaders, but with a single frightened child, who chose to protect instead of destroy. One night, Kale sat beside the old black arch, watching the stars move slowly. Valari sat beside him. He leaned his head on her shoulder and said, "Do you think Dad would have been proud?" Valari smiled through a tear. "I think he'd fall to his knees in joy," she whispered. "Just like I did. The day you told me something had appeared on your back." Kyle chuckled softly. "That feels like a long time ago." She kissed his forehead. "It was the beginning," she said. "And now the stars, they remember you." The end.